Back in the golden age of Indian cinema, a very mysterious visitor walked into a film studio and left absolutely everyone scratching their heads. So today, we're going to unravel this strange tale of makeup, ambition, and, believe it or not, Cold War politics in one of the most unlikely places you can imagine. This is the story of Poets and Pancakes.
So here's the central mystery, the question that was on everybody's mind at Gemini Studios. Why on earth was an English poet visiting a studio that made movies for a Tamil-speaking audience? I mean, these were people who had next to no connection with English poetry. It just didn't make any sense at all.
All right, to get to the bottom of this, we have to go back in time. The year is 1952. Picture this, Madras, a huge, bustling city. And right at its heart is Gemini Studios, one of the most influential film producers in all of India. This is the stage where our mystery is set. But before we even meet our mysterious poet, you really have to understand the peculiar world he was about to step into. Gemini Studios wasn't just some film set. It was like a miniature version of India itself, just filled with this cast of colorful characters and its own very strange customs. Our story kicks off in, of all places, the makeup department. And get this, it was housed in a building that people whispered had once been the stables of Robert Clive, the famous British general. So right from the get-go, you've got this fascinating, weird mix of colonial history and cinematic glamour. The studio was buying a brand of makeup called Pancake by the truckload, literally. And under the fiery, blistering heat of the old studio lights, the makeup artists had this bizarre job. Their goal was to turn actors into what the author calls hideous, crimson-hued monsters. It sounds crazy, but apparently only then would they actually look presentable on camera. And inside this chaotic world, we find this bitter rivalry. First, meet the office boy, who, by the way, was not a boy at all. He was a man in his 40s. He was a frustrated poet and writer stuck slapping makeup on crowd extras. And he directed all of his anger and resentment at just one man, Kothanongalam Subbu, the studio's golden boy, the number 2 guy in charge. So, let's zoom in on this guy, Subbu. He was basically the creative engine of the entire studio, a multi-talented genius who was, at the same time, both completely loved and deeply resented. I mean, Subbu was just tailor-made for filmmaking. There's this one story where a producer was totally stumped on how to shoot a really difficult scene. Subbu didn't just offer one solution, he came up with 4. And when the producer still wasn't sure, Subbu rattled off 14 more options just like that. That perfectly captures his creative genius. He was indispensable. And his talents seemed endless. He was a poet, a novelist, a fantastic actor, and he was incredibly charitable. But, and there's always a but, right? His unwavering loyalty to the boss, his readiness to agree with absolutely everything, well, that made him enemies. People like the office boy saw him as nothing more than a flatterer and blamed him for their own failures. Okay, and this is where the plot really thickens. To understand our poet's mysterious visit, we have to look beyond all the studio drama and into the world of politics. And this is where we find our first huge clue. Now, the staff at Gemini Studios, they were mostly followers of Gandhian principles, so they weren't intensely political, but they did share this deep-seated suspicion of communism. For them, communists were godless, violent people who just wanted to stir up unrest and had no respect for family. So, this general dislike of communism pretty much explains why the studio threw its doors wide open for a group called the Moral Rearmament Army, or MRA. This international group, about 200 people, got a very, very warm welcome at Gemini. Some people kind of joked and called them an international circus, but these guys were total professionals. They put on 2 plays with these incredible, first-rate sets and costumes that left a huge mark on the Madras drama community, influencing the local theater scene for years to come. And here it is. This is the key that starts to unlock our whole puzzle. The MRA wasn't just a theater troupe, it was an anti-communist movement. The big bosses in Madras, including S.S. Vasan, the founder of Gemini Studios, were, as the author puts it, just playing into their hands. Okay, so with that political context firmly in mind, let's flash forward. The mystery of the English poet lingered for years and years, until a chance discovery on a dusty sidewalk finally brought the whole thing into focus. Years after he'd left Gemini Studios, the author Asoka Mitran found himself with very little money but a whole lot of time on his hands. One day, he's browsing a sidewalk sale and spots a pile of brand new books for just 50 pace each. He buys one, and inside that cheap book, he finds the key to the entire mystery. The book was called The God That Failed, and what it was a collection of essays by these 6 famous writers, all detailing their brief, passionate affairs with communism and their eventual, bitter disillusionment with the whole ideology.
So as the author is scanning the list of contributors, one name just leaps right off the page, Stephen Spender, and suddenly it all clicked. The tall, serious Englishman who had given that baffling speech at Gemini Studios all those years ago, that was him. The mystery was finally solved. And here is the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. This was never about art. The studio boss, Mr. Vassan, probably knew nothing about Stephen Spender's poetry, and frankly, didn't care. What he was interested in was Spender, the ex-communist, the guy who wrote for The God That Failed. The poet wasn't invited for his verses. He was invited for his politics. And that's the story. A battle in the global Cold War, being fought not on some battlefield, but on a film set in South India, disguised as a poetry reading. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do the grand, sweeping ideas of history show up in the most unexpected little corners of our world, shaping our lives without us even knowing it?